What is the most unprofessional thing an employee has done that resulted in immediate termination? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. I was a kitchen supervisor in a nursing home, and we had a dishwasher on his third day pull the fire alarm on purpose to get out of his shift. I was part of the investigation since I was the supervisor on duty. He gave HR a wild story that him and another coworker were roughhousing, and he was pushed into the alarm, and as he fell, his shirt got caught on the lever and pulled it. HR then showed him the camera footage of him looking to make sure nobody was watching, then pulling the alarm on purpose. After he was fired, we found out from another coworker he was also suspended from his high school a couple months ago for pulling the alarm at school. Answer: Oh, I worked at a residential program for children with behavioral issues due to severe neglect and abuse. They loved to pull the fire alarms, so we had covers over them. The covers had alarms, so we would be alerted if a child was trying to pull the alarm. The covers did not prevent or slow down anyone from pulling the alarm, was a way to reduce the number of visits from the fire department. Anyway, one night an overnight staff accidentally bumped a cover off, setting off the cover alarm. He just had to put the cover back on to shut off the warning alarm. Two other staff stepped out into the hall to tell him to put the cover back on, and before they could stop him, he reached up and pulled the actual fire alarm, setting off the building-wide alarm at 2 a.m., waking up 34 children and sending out the fire department to shut off the darn alarms. We didn't have to fire him because he just stopped showing up to work. Story 2. Worked at an automotive OEM, and only two types of summary terminations I saw. One was leaking photos of pre-production items and stealing. My favorite was a guy stole a set of prototype tires rims and then just put them on his truck in the parking lot. Manager, who had been looking for said missing items, happened by the truck walking into work, realized those were the tires he was missing, fired the dude on the spot, but also took their tires back while he was being fired. So when he walked out jobless, his truck was on supports with no tires. Story 3. Things started going missing from people's desks. The culprit remained elusive until one day he showed his brand new iPod to another coworker. On the back, it was engraved with the name of a different coworker who had just had his brand new iPod stolen. Managers were summoned, he was gone within minutes, and so were all the unsolved thefts. Answer: See, I had a girl do this to me in year 5, 9, 10 years old. But it was a pen, and my name was hidden inside the pen rather than engraved on it. I don't think she would have been stupid enough to show off something she stole if it had had someone's name actually engraved on it. Also, she carried on stealing my pens after that. She just didn't show them off afterwards. Story 4. Many years ago, I had an obgyn appointment. A test had come back abnormal and things had to be discussed. I was young and scared. All I heard was cancer and infertility. I just started crying. My doctor was wonderful and explained everything. I was reassured but still scared. The doctor and her nurse left the room and I got dressed. As I left the examination room, walking by the nurse's area, I saw and heard her nurse mocking me. Wow, can I still have kids? Wow. Not only was I hurt, but also I was pissed. As I was rushing to leave, I passed the doctor's office. She was sitting at her desk doing paperwork. I knocked on her door jamb with tears in my eyes. I thanked her for being wonderful, but told her I wouldn't be treated that way by her nurse. She then asked me what I meant. When I told her, she took me by the hand and together we walked back to the nurse's desk. She directly asked her if what I said was true. The nurse fumbled over her words, basically said yes, but she didn't mean anything by it. The doctor said, "Get your things and get out of my office." "You're fired." I never saw that nurse again, but I respected my obgyn even more. Answer: Shoot, man, I was in your boat this year with uterine cancer and every nurse treated me with kid gloves, even though I assured them I was fine with surgery since I didn't plan to have kids. Though even though I have zero plans for kids, I did still cry a little over the option being taken away. If I had heard a nurse mocking me, I probably would have lost it. Story 5. Looking at child-adult content on a work computer at the methadone clinic where he worked as a social worker. Got a police adult worker and everything. Even made the back page perp papers. Answer: Years ago, we had a CFO that gave off serious pedo vibes and was a real asshat. I was in IT and had completed a lot of certifications and taken on a lot of responsibilities. I asked my MGR for a raise, $10K annually. He had to go to the CFO. The CFO spent $20K on outside consultants to determine that I did not need a $10K raise. I quit a week later. I found out a month later that the CFO was having laptop issues and my replacement picked up his laptop to fix it. He found it was riddled with spyware, Trojans, viruses, and best of all, a folder with gigs of child-adult content. He was fired, but I do not know if the police were involved. Story 6. Kicked a service dog thinking I wasn't watching. I already knew this particular employee didn't like dogs, which is fine as a personal preference. But this one was just quietly standing off to the side of the hallway, and it was clear she went out of her way to kick it. I fired her on the spot. Answer: I pet sat a dog for a priest a while back. We were friends. He had a rescued greyhound, who was the sweetest and most gentle boy ever. I was speaking about the dog to the other priest who lived in the rectory. To my shock, he told me he routinely kicked the dog because he was annoying. He also, in the same convo, told me to avoid black cats because they are evil. I immediately told my friend the priest that his housemate was kicking his dog. He left the priesthood shortly after. Story 7. Peeled into parking lot 9 a.m. tipsy and sideswiped a manager's car. Then casually walked to his desk. He was walked out about 5 minutes later. Bonus. Another employee told a customer, I wouldn't buy the big bag of food when they called to check on their dog's testing results. Edit, this was not a vet with a dark sense of humor. It was a customer service rep replying to someone that had called into a lab to check on results. The rep did not even have the authority to disclose results. Answer, we had someone hit the CFO's car on the CFO's first day in the office. The employee tried to pretend they didn't do anything. It was all caught on the security cameras. Our CFO was very gracious about it. The employee was completely overwhelmed and just didn't know what to do, an older woman. She did take care of all the damage. It was minor scrapes, but still. Story 8. Years ago, I worked with a woman who applied for a smallish loan at some point. I don't remember what it was for, but definitely something specific. She ended up being approved for $5,000 and told me the news like she had won the lottery. She then pulled a no-show the following day and never came back. This was a preschool, so that complicated things a bit for the week, but we managed to make it work until someone could fill permanently. I remember the director commenting that what she did was so stupid and he'd never rehire her again. No shoot, Derek. Glad to hear it. Keep up those standards. Anyway, about a year later, I ran into her at Walmart where she was refolding some shirts or something. We only briefly caught up, but she did mention with wide, shocked eyes that the school wouldn't hire her back when she came looking for work again. Shockingly, it had not taken her long to blow through her winnings. Answer, this sparked a memory. I had a coworker who owned a house in an urban area. Her roof was leaking, so she got a loan to have it repaired, but she hired shoddy workers to fix it. She took her whole family on vacation with most of the money from the loan and bought a timeshare. The roof continued to leak, causing so much water damage and mold the house had to be condemned. Her whole life was a dumpster fire and she was a terrible employee. But it was fun to listen to her stories. Story 9. Left a series of tipsy, very explicit voicemails on my phone, comparing me to the girl in the spicy movie he was watching and describing in detail the actions he was taking on his person. HR had to transcribe them all for the documentation. It was vile. Story 10. Secretary at the front desk, visibly tipsy at 11 a.m. Fired immediately with a ride home offered. She immediately went to a bar across the street and had to be kicked out with the police involved. Ends up she already had a tipsy driving conviction and wasn't supposed to be drinking at all, so she went to jail. Sad story. Story 11. Oh, I remember another one. We sent a couple of sales reps on a work trip. One married man, we'll call him Bill Smith, one woman who was not his wife. The submitted expense reports, and it was apparent that they had shared a room for the duration. It was confirmed they were having an affair on the company dime. I'm not sure who was fired and who quit, but they were both gone by the time I was hired to work the phones. Not long after I started, I got a call from a woman asking for Bill Smith. I explained that we didn't have a Bill Smith on my list of employees, and the woman said, "Oh, yes, you do. I'm his wife, and he's a vice president there." I put her on hold and asked around and was told that Bill used to work there, but no longer did. I had to explain to this woman that Bill truly no longer worked there. She was not in any way, shape, or form pleased to hear this, and I'm not entirely sure she believed me anyway. My co-workers were delighted to fill me in on the gory details later. IYRC, one on the senior staff, agreed to call Bill's wife, ex-wife maybe, and handle things. Answer, wasn't there a famous Reddit post that was kind of like this? Except told from the jerk's POV. Some kind of arrogant manager had to stay at a hotel, and he harassed a mom who was in the hotel pool. Later fired for it, and managed to get his company blacklisted from the hotel. Then he lies to his wife about how he's still going to work, and eventually everything implodes spectacularly, and he still blames everyone but himself for it. Story 12. My wife's company has a booth at CES in Vegas every year. I went with her one year. We are going up to our room from the casino, and there is one of the guys she works with sprawled out tipsy halfway in the elevator. A couple of his buddies are trying to get him up. I heard him say, "Oh shoot, don't tell Phil," the owner of the company. Phil was standing right next to me. Answer: went to the Caribbean one year, and on the last morning, we're waiting for the bus, and a group is freaking out because one of their crew is missing. My buddy, a night owl, pulls out his camera. Found a guy sleeping in the elevator this morning. Is this your buddy? No. Found a guy getting kicked out of the beach bar for peeing on the floor. Is this your buddy? No. Found a guy sleeping in a bush. Is this your buddy? No. Story 13. We had an employee who got accused of intimacy harassment. We had a meeting with him to get his side of the story and told him not to speak to anyone about it, especially anyone he thought might have turned him in, while we finished up the investigation. Just go back to your office and do your work. We didn't tell him who accused him, of course, so we are taking 10 minutes to decide to fire him and check with HR that we have checked all the boxes. Meanwhile, his response was to walk into his accuser's offices, shut her door, lean against the door so she couldn't leave, and start screaming at her. He got fired immediately. Answer: OMG, you reawakened a memory from high school. There was this weird kid named Will Bill, and he was very much a 4chan incel type. Well, at the time, they were trying to pass the SOPA Act, and he posted on Facebook of they passed the SOPA Act him, bringing a gun to school. Someone turned him in. They kind of gave him a slap on the wrist. This was about a year or so before the school shooting thing became very common. So he goes home and posts, "Whoever turned me in is going to get a shotgun mouth, was next week at school, expelled immediately." As a weird epilogue, he tried to get a job where me and a few other students work, and we told the manager he threatened to shoot up our school and would quit if they hired him. Story 14. After a brief discussion about tattoos and locations, she dropped her pants in the office reception area to show everyone the ink she had on her jerk cheeks. No underwear, just full frontal glory. Before I could recover from my shock and tell her to pull her pants back up, a customer walked in and then immediately walked out. There were other issues, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back. She was there for less than a week. Answer: that unlocked a weird memory. When I was a teen, I worked a mall job for a bit at a store that was just opening. So for weeks, the job was just unpacking clothes and setting up racks. We all kind of got used to not seeing the public and being able to chat about whatever. A couple weeks after we opened, it was a bit slow, and we all ended up hanging at the Center Island checkout, talking about tattoos and piercings. The shift manager told us she had her nipples pierced and someone asked to see. I assumed they'd pop to a changing room or something, but nope. Full tits out in the middle of the store, still chatting about the process, cost, how much it hurt, etc. I was so weirded out and no one else was fazed. She was still there long after I quit, so I'm assuming no one snitched even if a customer did see. Story 15. Our chief of security was caught stealing patients' valuables from the safe, escorted out in handcuffs. Story 16. I worked in a Kmart store years ago that was being renovated. Our store manager was caught putting some boxes of floor tiles and buckets of paint in his car to use at his own house. We had a new manager the next morning. Story 17. Guy went on an expensive personal trip to a tropical island and charged the entire thing to his corporate Amex, then claimed it was stolen and the charges weren't his. Never mind that the hotel and airline tickets were clearly in his name. Story 18. Police turned up at the door. New guy says they'll be wanting to talk to him. He packed up all his stuff like he was leaving for the day, even though he was only an hour into his shift. Police identify themselves as being on a task force dealing with child protection. They do want to talk to the new guy, and they've apparently been trying to reach him outside of work for days. New guy liked computers and had no kids. He never came back. Story 19. Taking selfies and posting them to social media in a facility where photography is strictly prohibited. Dude took a selfie in front of some proprietary gear and posted it to his IG. Within 30 minutes, he was escorted out of the facility. Answer: I was at Apple for 20 years, and you better believe that everything is secret. When we transitioned to Intel, the new MacBook Pro was shown at Macworld, but the packaging was not. This was when Apple changed from the big bulky boxes to the much slimmer packaging. I had so many of these boxes stuffed into my office and lab because we couldn't trash them in the normal way yet. Anyway, one afternoon, a coworker came into my office and directed me to a Flickr page showing the unboxing of the new Intel MacBook Pro with pictures of the packaging and all. The pictures were obviously in an Apple lab, and the coworker asked if it was one of my guys, and I said no, and that I didn't know anyone that stupid. Turns out I did know someone that stupid because the lab was around the corner from my office, and the person was a kid that was kind of an up-and-comer. Saw him being escorted out a week later. Story 20. Guy I worked with when I sold suits in a department store. He was a problem for a while, liked to take way longer than he was supposed to on his breaks, acted like a jerk to coworkers, go to the bathroom and be gone for 45 minutes at a time and so on. But management let it slide because he was a top seller and signed up a lot of people for the store card. Till one day he mouthed off to the wrong manager. He was gone on one of his 45-minute bathroom trips when she came by making her rounds. I had told her that he had disappeared again and happened to be still fixing a rack nearby when he came back. She made a comment about how he can't keep disappearing like that, and he thought it was appropriate to ask her, "You want to come to the bathroom with me and hold it so you know where I am?" He was gone the next day. Answer. I worked in a fab shop as a lead hand of a small department, like 6 people total in my department. I had a guy who after every break would take a 10 or 15-minute bathroom break. Every break, every day. I spoke to him about it, but he felt there was nothing I could do, so he persisted. There really wasn't much I could do. It's a fab shop with 50 employees maybe. No HR department. It was a mom-and-pop operation. There was a guy in the back of the shop everyone disliked because he was loud and obnoxious. So I quietly bought him lunch at the lunch truck across the road in exchange for him starting a rumor that Colin, my bathroom break abuser, was in there after every break masturbating. It stopped basically immediately. Story 21. A security sergeant called from home. I left a CD in the sergeant's office computer. Take it out and put it in my desk, but don't look at it. It contained a lot of kiddie adult content. Not only fired, but usage on a federally controlled institution was a felony level offense. Never saw him again. Story 22. A guy I knew got fired for being late too much. Union tried to get his job back at arbitration. He was late for that also. Answer. Had a union guy, an engineer and not part of the union, get written up multiple times without being fired. He was constantly late, missed work on a Monday because of a DUI over the weekend, and one time even hit a guy in the parking lot because he was late arriving back from lunch and drove like a maniac. The straw that broke the camel's back was when he was on jail for the previously mentioned DUI. He was getting work release. The sheriff's department dropped him off and picked him up from work every day. His girlfriend stopped by for a conjugal visit over lunch, and he was late coming back. The supervisor stepped outside to look for him before he called the sheriff to report him missing and caught him balls deep in the back seat. Wasn't even smart enough to go park down the street. They were right outside the door in the guest parking space. Story 23. I wasn't in the meeting, but I was in the office when it happened. Woman called into a meeting while driving. Not the best thing, but not the worst thing, until she got cut off by a black driver, forgot to put herself on mute and yelled fudge N. She worked on a 10-person team and about 6 of her coworkers were black. Didn't even have to adult worker her out of the office because she was working from home that day. Story 24. Nurse accessed health records of their neighbor with whom they were having a property dispute, and the neighbor found out because the nurse threatened to share the info with their other neighbors. Congratulations. Insta-fired and sued. Answer. There was a privacy breach that made the local papers. They did an internal investigation and found 20 nurses who were accessing patient information that they weren't supposed to. 19 of them were reprimanded. One insisted that she had done nothing wrong and that everybody did it. She did the same thing on the local news. That was when she was fired. Story 25. Had intimacy in the company's lactation room while on break and posted it on social media right after. Several coworkers saw the post right away. Both employees were fired immediately. Story 26. We worked at a satellite media company. Guy in customer support was so impressed with the speed of our customer's network that he seeded public torrents on their network over the weekend. The customer was a TV radio conglomerate, LOL. Answer. Years ago, I worked for Apple Retail, and we have great internet speeds in our stores at the time. Across the hall from us was a Sony store before I think most of them were shut down. Their team would set up to tap into our Wi-Fi and run torrent downloads all night long. We couldn't figure out why we were getting such high usage at a time when the store was closed. Once we figured out what was going on, we throttled back service after hours and finally it stopped. Story 27. Someone did a fire watch at a store. Very, very rich store. Like the cheapest thing in the store was $1K minimum. A fire watch is when the fire alarm detection and suppression system isn't working and shut off. Someone has to be in the building 247. Anyways, the site paid well, like 30 rares to do literally nothing, with no risk. It wasn't the type of shoot you could steal in a good part of town. He bought like 3 hookers and blow and fudged them all over the front desk and in multiple parts of the store. He had access to the cameras too, so he knew where everything was recorded, and he didn't think anyone would notice, I guess. Dude left cum on the front desk, trash, and used condoms in the store too. On the plus side, they agreed to pay me 35 euros to work every shift, and overtime on top for a few days after that, haha. Story 28. Pulled a piece on a shift supervisor. We were working in retail and the manager was a complete jerk all the time. You know the type of person who gets super into company spirit and who power trips over their first job with an iota of authority, still didn't deserve what happened. This guy, who got hired with me, had been complaining about him for a bit. One shift, I went into the back room where we took cardboard to the compactor and IDK what started it, but I heard them yelling at each other. The manager never laid a hand on him that I saw, but this guy was really getting up in the manager's face, and one thing led to another. All of a sudden, boom, he had a gun in his hands, pointed at the manager. IDK, if you can call it immediate termination. The guy held it up. The manager threw up his hands, begging him not to shoot. The guy just kept it trained on him and then left. Police got called, but I never found out what happened to him. I just know he sure as fudge didn't work there anymore. Story 29. I had to report another ER nurse for being super tipsy on shift. Not even still tipsy from last night. Tipsy. Nope. Started drinking at 8 a.m. on his break. Tipsy. Answer. A colleague showed up for her shift in the morning at 7 a.m. I was doing the night shift. She was completely plastered. This was apparently not the first time. I called her mother, a good friend and colleague of mine, told her daughter was tipsy and I was bringing her home to her and to call her in sick. She ended up getting the help she needed and is now head nurse in another clinic. She didn't get fired because I made sure that she was out of there before even going near a patient. Management did find out, but they allowed her to get help and take off sick and not lose her job license. Story 30. When I worked as a mortgage loan processor, I discovered that the loan officer was falsifying documents in order to get a fraudulent mortgage approved. I worked with the manager to re-verify all the documentation as well as documenting how and why the documents he provided were fraudulent. He was called into the manager's office and confronted, whereupon he ran away. Literally just got up and ran and got his car and left. Story 31. We eliminated the position of one of our longtime employees. She was a pain in the jerk and filed HR complaints all the time for perfume smells and people walking around in sandals that make flopping sounds, radios too loud, etc. All petty bullshit complaints. They really weren't terminable offenses, but we just needed to get rid of her, and part of the deal was she got a 40-week severance package. The terminated employee's manager was relatively new, so right after she was terminated, his VP told him to contact IT security and get access to her emails, private directories, and instant messages, IMs. Later that day, the manager pulls me aside and tells me they just fired a long-time female privacy administrator right after lunch. Apparently, when he got access to his terminated employees' IMs, there were vile and disgusting exchanges between his ex-employee and the privacy administrator who were close friends. They had offensive and racist nicknames for him and other managers and VPs in the company, and all of it was saved on the company's IT servers. At the end of the day, my VP pulled me aside and told me how furious she was that she didn't think to pull those IMs before terminating our employee and giving her a $56,000 severance, because she could have been fired for cause and saved the company a lot of money. Story 32. I had a manager, let's call him Paul, that didn't like me for whatever reason, which was a first for me. I've always had the reputation for being dependable and a hard worker, whatever. So the two managers above him announced they're going to start their own business together and they'll be leaving the company in about a month. Within a few minutes, Paul comes up to me with a huge shoot-eating grin and says to me, "Just wait until they're gone and am promoted. I'm going to fire your jerk." I asked him what had done to him, and he basically just explained that he felt I was a brown nose. And the only reason I had my job was because his two bosses liked me. So it's my fault I was likable. Cool. I tell the two bosses that are leaving what Paul said to me, and all that was said was, "We'll take care of it." An hour later, they caught Paul and another employee in the parking lot smoking plant substance in his car, which was against company policy. Fired immediately. Story 33. I was asked to precept a nurse for a day to see if he was ready to be off orientation. I corrected a couple of documentation things. Then when I watched him giving medications, he was giving the wrong dose of something. I pulled him aside and corrected him, and he shouted that a woman can't tell me what to do. He backed me into a corner. I really thought he was going to assault me, so I pushed past him and called his supervisor. He was out half an hour later. Turned out the supervisor was looking for a reason to fire him and figured he'd call him out. Answer: last week I transported a patient from PASU to his room. The nurse just said to me, "Hess in there and ready to go." The dude was so agitated I nearly called a code gray. I managed to calm him down and get him to his room. Came back and told the nurse she can't just dump an agitated patient on us like that. We need forewarning for our own safety. She did a long, rambling excuse about why she didn't, and eventually admitted that she was absolutely scared of him. Meanie, please, that's exactly when you need to give us the heads up. She's a terrible nurse, and I say that as her both co-worker and also one time as her patient. Story 34. Guy was a temp, had been there a while. The company had an unofficial policy to make any temp permanent if they wanted it after 18 months or so. As there was no other way to get a perm job there, this was highly desirable, lots of benefits and better pay included with job security. The week after being made permanent, he completely stopped trying, started turning up late, refused to do anything he deemed as not his job, was given a fair amount of warning, including, "We will fire you if you keep this up." Yet he thought he was bulletproof. They sacked him a week or so later. Answer: my brother worked at a Ford plant, tells a story about a guy who was about to become a regular employee, become union, get all the nice union benefits, etc. This guy starts talking about his plans to get hurt as soon as his full benefits kick in so he can go out on work comp, work the system for disability, etc. Co-workers just nod along, but as soon as they get a break, they go to the front office and report him one by one. Guy was escorted off the line and out of the plant, put on a do not hire list. Story 35. Had a new 17-year-old cashier I was training at an electrical retailer. We used to have MTV on the display TVs. Cashier saw a man watching an Avril Lavigne video, wandered over to him and said, "She's hot. I'd shoot on her chest." 17 men's. That's how long he lasted as an employee. My favorite part was explaining to his mother when she phoned up to have a go at me for not giving him a fair chance. Story 36. Used to work for a premier tech retailer. Co-worker who was a notorious scrounger took a fellow employee's nice sunglasses from his locker in the break room. The fellow employee is asking around for days if anyone had seen his lost sunglasses. Then the scrounger wore them back into work a few days later. Instant confrontation and firing. Answer: that reminds me of an old roommate. There were 6 of us in the house, and one of the girls said a DVD of hers had gone missing and asked us to look out for it. That night, another girl was making fun of her, saying no one wanted her stuff. She and I shared a bedroom, and I just happened to find that DVD while I was cleaning. I quietly returned it to the other girl and advised her to keep her door locked while she was out. The thief had stolen from me too, but I always got the items back because of the shared room. Story 37. A medical lab technician who also had a side job working as a courier for the company serving the lab had my job before me. Got fired from both jobs when bits of her lunch during a courier shift was found inside the sample bag she was delivering. Basically inside 2 of the 3 layers of sealing. Only way it could happen was she was messing around with them while on her lunch break, which also meant she didn't have them in the transportation coolers either. Story 38. An auto service technician employee decided to take a customer's $500,000 sports car for a quick joyride after he completed his work on it. It was a simple interior repair and did not require a test drive afterward. Our strict policy was to park cars like this in a special designated area for high-end vehicles. But no, he decided to take it around the block real quick. After hammering it out of an intersection, he lost control and collided with a large tree. He totaled it. He was okay, but he was terminated quickly. Story 39. I was Tier 1 support. We had a Tier 3 support tech who was a horn dog, and I could not believe he had not been canned. I was working with him on an issue one morning, then could not get hold of him that afternoon. Asked the boss where he was and was told he was gone and would not be back. Later heard he had been caught in a storage room with the wife of one of the directors. A month later, I had his job and had to clean up his laptop. Story 40. 2 stories. I worked in a hotel. On NYE, a guy called out sick. The shift before, he took a block of rooms and marked them as out of order, which no one questioned because we weren't that busy. Business hotel in the burbs. He also made a bellman's key, a key to open any room. Noi, he snuck into the hotel. Poorly, with about 40 friends, including intimacy workers. He commenced to having a party in the out-of-order rooms. However, the dumbass didn't even block off the whole floor, so other guests called down saying it was really loud, and there were naked women running up and down the hallway. He was fired and kicked out before the night was over. I also worked at a fast food place. I worked with a dumbass of a human that always got into trouble. I was doing my job, and this other guy was busy playing with a new knife a few feet away, being dumb and making stabby motions with his hand and the brand new knife. I turned and he stabbed me in my hand. Not on purpose. But it hit maybe 1 millimeter from the main artery in my hand. I've never seen blood actually squirt before this. I was taken to urgent care. The dude was gone before I got back. No major damage, but 3 stitches. Still have a scar some 20 years later. Story 41. One company I worked at sponsored a major football team. One day we were offered a free raffle for some free seats. An email went out to the whole company telling us how to enter. A relatively new starter did a reply all saying, "I bet those marketing wankers keep this for themselves." He didn't last to the end of the day. Story 42. I worked for a swimming pool maintenance company some years ago. Every pool tech had a van with tools, chemicals, and equipment to drive. One first-year employee was arrested on the job for smoking meth in the van at a convenience store. There was a cop in the parking lot watching him do it, and he had the substances. A pipe on him at the time of his arrest. I got a cell call from the boss asking if my helper had a license, and we had to go pick up the van. I never saw the guy again. Story 43. I was in a collections call center. New agent takes call. Person says they need to call back later to make the payment. You don't get credit unless you actually take the payment. New agent pulls out his debit card and puts the payment in for them, scheduled for the next day so he can get credit when they call back to provide the correct card info. He also made sure to let his manager know, so when they called back, they would know what was happening. He was a giant pain during the onboarding process. We felt like he was setting us up for something. Long story, just very demanding and adamant for accommodations on things. Turns out he was just a 50-year-old moron. He lasted 3 days out of training. Story 44. Our team worked Sat, Sun, Mon, 12-hour shift. Had a girl who constantly called in on Sat with the excuse her kid was sick. One Sun, she showed up after calling in the day before, wearing the t-shirt from a concert she went to free night. As she's walked out, I heard her tell the supervisor, "I can't believe you're firing a single mother with a sick child." Story 45. Guy at my old job called in sick, then went live on Instagram from a pool party with our manager's niece. He was tagged in the video. The next shift he showed up like nothing happened, got walked out before he could clock in. Answer. Many years ago, I was a supervisor of a small team. I had one woman who was a problem in general. She called in sick one morning and then a few hours later showed up at the office to show her work friends the outfit she'd purchased that morning at the mall. I gave her a written warning the next day and she threw a fit. How dare I question what she did on her personal time? I pointed out that I wasn't questioning what she did on her personal time. I was questioning her integrity for lying and her judgment skills for coming into the office when she'd called out claiming to be ill. She didn't last that much longer. Story 46. In the 90s, our system could not prove one of my programmers watching adult content. We suspected but could not terminate without exact details. We were getting a system upgrade, and I had his supervisor warn him that the new system would provide proof of who was going to forbidden websites. He ignored the warning. He was fired. Story 2. In a highly classified government office, another contractor from a different firm than mine was pissed and threatened to delete the work he had done, wargame modeling. He was escorted out immediately and lost his clearance. Answer. My dad once worked for a major aerospace defense contractor in MD. Everyone came into the office on Monday with the same email in their inbox, stating at X time the Saturday before, a senior manager logged into his computer and proceeded to download illegal adult content from a variety of websites and FTP sites, and that all network logs, user activity in his computer had been turned over to law enforcement. It didn't take long for everyone to figure out who the 57-year-old married guy with 3 children was, since he never came to work again. It sent an effective message to everyone. Story 47. This is from back when cell phones were rare, the world still ran on landlines, and daytime calls outside your city were hell expensive. My company had a system that logged phone calls for accounting purposes. Guy came in on a weekend with a friend, disconnected the printer that logged outgoing phone calls, and made a bunch of very expensive long-distance calls. I don't recall how he got caught. Either the logging system had cached the data and dumped it to the printer when it was reconnected, or someone saw the call history when the bill came in the mail. Either way, they figured out who was responsible, because he was exactly the kind of jackass who would do something like that. He was swiftly canned, but he maintained contact long enough to write a poem about the perceived injustice of the whole affair and to display said poem in the break room. Story 48. Day 1 made a phone call in the break room, meaning about the place, in Spanish. Manager is from Mexico, so he fired her in Spanish. Story 49. Use the hard R. When confronted and asked, "What did you say?" he said, "What I said was," and repeated it. It wasn't an immediate termination because corporate company still needs to do the HR thing, but he has to sit in an office with our black district manager and black HR rep. Story 50. I worked at a Verizon corporate location for a while. Not a lot of people might think this, but the amount of information at reps' fingers is startling. Because of that, we had to take strict ethics courses routinely. Those classes included don't look up info. You don't have to look up, and don't look for celebrity or political figures, numbers, or addresses. Makes sense. One employee looked up and allegedly succeeded in finding Barack Obama's personal phone number. Our system logged every single thing that reps did. So before the guy could log out of the tablet, our manager got a call and the employee was instantly walked. It was a very big deal. Answer: I used to work as a database administrator for the state of Florida. I could see all the searches people input. Over a certain period of time, no less than 13 people in the children and family department were let go because they looked up the history of abuse reports containing the name Kaylee Anthony. Probably people are still getting fired for it today. Edit: I spelt Kaylee wrong up above. Story 51. I work in manufacturing, and one day a new guy was being introduced to the crew by our manager, and when they got to our line lead, see female, she told him that if he needed anything to come to her. He blurted out, "Okay, so if I need a blowjob, I will come to you." He said it so nonchalantly that it kind of took a second for everyone to realize what he actually said. He was walked out right there. That misogynistic crap doesn't fly in our shop. Story 52. I used to work in this call center years ago. The supervisor was a young, super chill, intelligent dude whom everyone loved. One day he was fired on the spot, left within like 10 minutes, and noon heard of him again. It turned out that he asked one of the co-workers who he was friends with to borrow like $20. She was dumb enough to give him her credit card and her PIN and told him to go to the ATM. Couple minutes later, she got a notification from the bank that a couple of hundreds were withdrawn. She freaked out, reported him to his boss, who got furious and fired him right away. Turned out that the guy had a serious online gambling problem and owed tons of money everywhere, and this was the last straw. Story 53. Skating on the pallet jack like it was a scooter. I get it, I really do. There have been literally so many times I've wanted to do the same thing myself, but this facility had hella cameras. They had him from like 4 angles and at least one eyewitness. He was cooked. Story 54. One of the top executives at my husband's work got absolutely shoot-faced at a Christmas party, stood up on a table in the middle of the banquet hall, and told the CEO his wife was an ugly beast, then told everyone to fudge off. One of the funniest things I've ever seen, but yeah, he never came back. Career tragic end. Story 55. Out HR lady was married to one of our service techs. All our work phones have the same combo to open them, and people are too lazy to change it. Well, she had sent some private pictures to her husband on the work phone. A guy working with her husband asked to use his phone one day and sent the private pictures to himself. This led to at least half of our field guys seeing our HR lady's private pictures. Owner stepped in to figure out who was sharing them. Once word had gotten out and back to the office, this happened. Said a PI was already looking into it, and the guy who did it was gone only hours later. I'm pretty sure he just quit once the owner told everyone how it was being looked into. Story 56. A guy was working on a tricky software issue on the mainframe. He'd been at it for about 20 hours straight. His manager went up to him and told him to go home, get some sleep, and tackle it again in the morning. So he slugged his manager full in the face. I was working late too, and was unfortunate enough to witness it. He got fired, but then was rehired a week later. As far as I recall, he solved the problem after he came back. Story 57. A couple stick out. My husband worked for a small company where he did lots of jobs. One of them was LAN admin. Long story shorter, one of the field sales reps came in with his laptop and said it was running slow. Well, Hubs takes a look and it's running slow because it's filled with adult content. He reformats the computer, it's working fine. He and his colleague tell this guy, "Hey, we noticed there were a lot of large personal files on this computer. Just a reminder that work computers are for work business only. If you want something for your personal files, here are some laptops that are inexpensive and will work for what you need." And they handed him some printouts from Circuit City. He just muttered something under his breath, grabbed the computer, and left. About 3 weeks later, he came back with the same running slow issue on his computer. Well, again, it was running slow because it was filled with adult content. Well, my husband and his colleague both felt they had already given this guy the benefit of the doubt once. They weren't doing it twice. So they went to the company president, explained the situation, and she said, "I'll take care of it." Guy was fired by end of day. For me, personally, we hired a guy, Ray. He was kind of an odd guy, but whatever. We needed someone to do the job. Ray was at the office regular hours, but didn't seem to be getting much done. We had a couple of people work with Ray to see if there was a training issue or a comprehension issue, but there didn't seem to be. Again, another week passes, and still not a lot of throughput. So we decide to investigate, and we have our land team pull what Ray has been doing. Well, it ends up Ray has been spending most of the day trying to figure out how to bypass the company firewall so he can look at adult content online while at work. As Ray was still in his probationary period, he was told at the end of the day that his services were no longer needed. Story 58. I used to work at a gym in Sokol, and we had that one guy who was an overconfident douche in our team as a trainer. He had the bad habit of pinching girls' butts that he knew, even some coworkers who felt like he was God's gift to women. Long story short, he pinched the wrong butt one day, and it happened to be owner's daughter. Never saw him again after that day. Story 59. New guy got completely shit-faced at the office Christmas party, and intimacy assaulted our coworker's girlfriend. Luckily, the guy didn't witness this, or things would have ended very badly for him. Dude came in the following Monday looking like passing, was ushered into a meeting room by one of the managers and quietly left. We never saw him again. Answer. Also had a coworker doing something similar. He had been there for a couple of months and mistook the casual work atmosphere for anything goes. Got tipsy at the office Christmas party and put the moves on several women. I'm sure he thought he was very cool. By the next business day, he had 5 HR complaints lodged against him. The kicker, he is now a college teacher. Story 60. Saw a girl stir a beer she just poured with her finger to reduce the foam, then hand it to the customer. Story 61. A new coworker who'd been on the job for only a couple of weeks went into a patient's chart and took pics with her phone of the clinical photos showing the patient's injury. This injury was gruesome. High-speed car crash. Leg was completely split open, showing muscles, tendons, bone, etc. When asked why she took the photo, she said she was going to show it to her friends. When told she was absolutely not allowed to take pictures of patient records or send private patient info to people randomly, she said, "Who's going to stop me?" Fired immediately for egregious HIPAA violations. Story 62. Daycare teacher got into a physical fight with a parent in the daycare with their children present. Then called her friends for backup, and they got into more fights in the parking lot. She was pregnant too. Story 63. I knew a girl that worked at a mortuary who thought she did such a good makeup job on a recently deceased elderly woman that she posted photos of her work to her personal FB page. The family of the deceased found them and showed up in person to the mortuary, rightfully furious to demand the pictures removed and that she be terminated. She was. Story 64. I worked in a restaurant. A customer collapsed in the crowded waiting area. Find out later it was a non-fatal heart attack. Good old Rolf, the stoner busboy, stepped over the customer who fell right in front of him and loudly announces, "Well, there goes another satisfied customer, my." Story 65. Got caught smoking NY a female coworker in an area where no outside goods were allowed, and smoking obviously was strictly prohibited. He then doubled down intimacy harassing her. Bonus points, she was the wife of a higher up in the company. He was escorted out immediately. Story 66. This was nearly 20 years ago. I worked in a meat shop in a grocery store. Husband was the store manager. Produce manager was his wife. He had an affair with a teenage cashier, although I'm not sure if she was underage. He also bought her a car, or at least made payments on the car she drove. It had been suspected, but finally confirmed when another employee caught them eating lunch together, took a photo and showed his wife in the store. She had a meltdown and screamed at him in front of the registers. He was fired, the cashier was fired, and the wife quit out of embarrassment. In all honesty, all 3 of them were vile people. The store manager was a tiny little guy and an absolute bully. His wife had the personality of Umbridge from Harry Potter, and the cashier was an absolute meanie to everyone. Came to work fudge up on a regular basis, and it got worse once she hooked up with the manager because she got away with everything. The assistant store manager replaced him, and he was fired 6 months later. He was having a meeting with another employee, told her to wait in his office while he dealt with something else, and forgot he had anime adult content open on his PC. Story 67. There was a nursing student at the nursing home I worked at who was taking the fentanyl patches off of patients who couldn't speak and putting them in her mouth. The supervisor told the one guy to just start screaming the next time she did it, and that's how they were able to catch her. Addiction is an ugly beast. Story 68. Working in an airline call center many years ago, the airline had a since discontinued recognition program that was aimed at rewarding secretaries, PAs, etc. The people who actually did much of the booking of flights back in the day. Well, one night, a flying orchid was on the phone with an agent, and things between them got heated. The caller must have tried to throw their status as a flying orchid around, because the next thing we heard was the agent loudly announcing, "Listen, lady, I don't care if you're a fudge flying squirrel, the answer is no." It was the last phone call the agent would ever take. Story 69. Guy would watch adult content on his computer at work where people could see it. He was actually warned to stop. He didn't. He had some type of sweat gland issue where he was always moist. His adult content watching, and that was unsettling. Story 70. First day as a caregiver in a group home for special needs adults, my trainer showed me how to wash a female client who'd soiled themselves. He basically used a pitcher and sloshed soapy water over her while she sat on the toilet, down over her shoulders to the unprotected floor. Barely cleaned her skin at all, just made a hellacious mess. While asking her, "Why did you do this?" I reported him to the manger and he was fired before the floor was dry. Story 71. I had this guy that had started working for me on the factory floor, had busted him twice without his safety glasses on, pulled him into the office and had a coaching session with him, reiterating the importance of safety, the risks that were associated with the job, and the potential consequences of failing to take the correct safety measures. He came in the next day, and about 2 hours into shift, I noticed that his shoes had been covered in black Gorilla Tape. Upon further inspection, he had taped up a pair of white K-Swiss shoes and wasn't wearing his steel toes. Kid left them at home and thought he could hide it from me by covering his shoes with black duct tape. Basically fired him on the spot. I don't think he made it a week. Story 72. Guy was a corporate instructor at a global medical device company, training new hires at a hotel facility for a 2-week session. Took some students out to a bar for some partying and a few games of pool. Flopped his male body part on the table to cause his opponent to flub the shot. Later, while diving back to the hotel, he was in the back seat and covered the eyes of the driver with his hands during snowy conditions. Oh yeah, fudge one of the students as well. He was married with 6 kids at the time. Story 73. A lady I worked with very briefly, who was married BTW, asked a male coworker on a date. He said yes. I don't think he knew she was married. He's a pretty religious dude. So they made plans for that weekend. Later that night, while he was at work, she was texting him, and eventually she tried to move the conversation in an intimacy direction. She asked him to send her dirty pics from the bathroom at work. He told her he didn't like sending OER receiving those types of pictures. She proceeded to send him private pictures, including a picture of her jerk. This was all through Snapchat, so he used a camera that we use at work to take pictures for evidence. My poor boss, the sweetest woman in the world, had to view and print off 810 copies of the pictures for the confrontation termination. Absolutely nuts. ETA, it was her 3rd day on the job. Story 74. I worked at a recreation program for people with disabilities, and during training week for a new set of hires, one of the new hires, when asked to give some ideas of how they would deal with an escalated client, said, "I would just ignore them." That person was told that they could go home. Story 75. We had S-girl who tattooed herself in her cubicle. While that wasn't the reason she got fired the next day, she came in, coked out of her mind, still wearing the same clothes she wore to the concert the night before. Her nose started to bleed, so she began doing bloody snot rockets. After that, HR had enough. Story 76. I worked for one of the top 10 financial institutions in the world, at least it was at the time, and this was well over 20 years ago. So safe to tell this story. We handled investments for many well-known celebrities and dignitaries of the day, and being in operations, we had access to all of their information. Many of them had management companies, so all we had on file was the address of their manager's office, but not all of them did this. Some used their home address for statements and other office correspondence. Well, a newly minted MBA was hired to help one of our top producers manage his clients. And guess what he did at the end of his first week? Yup, started printing the statements of people whose names you would most assuredly recognize. If you are a human that lives on planet Earth, you 100 have seen these people on TV shows, blockbuster movies, and on stage. Accessing this data is a huge deal and a major infraction, absolutely forbidden to do unless you're the account manager. Now, what we found out what happened is that when the account manager left for a meeting, this genius thought it a treat to jump on his terminal and access all this juicy data and print it out. His plan was to simply collect all the printed pages and make off with it and do Lord knows what with it. Roll around on it naked? I still have no idea. What he didn't realize is that legal had software that tracked this type of action, and it was flagged. While I wasn't on the floor directly, I could kind of hear what transpired if I stood up and looked over the wall of cubicles, and later confirmed by direct witnesses. While they seriously doubted the account manager did the printing, they spoke to him first, privately, and they quickly figured out what happened. They confronted this guy, whose uncle worked at the firm, mind you, which was mortifying for him because he was a great guy, and he claimed innocence for about 15 minutes, and then they really turned the screws to him, threatening legal action, etc., and he finally fessed up. Your word is your bond on Wall Street, and word got around mighty fast about this moron, and that was that. Never worked in the field again. Last we heard from his uncle is that he went to dental school. Story 77. Trying to steal methanol from a pharmaceuticals factory. Dude was lucky to get caught. It was poisonous, not drinkable adult beverage. Story 78. Restaurant work. Nice place, wins awards, but BOH gonna do BOH things. We're pretty lenient with substances policy. Dishwasher smoked a full joint in the customer bathrooms during the dinner rush. If he had just gone out back, he might have just gotten a stern word. But the one rule management doesn't fudge with is impacting the customer experience, and you could smell it from the host stand. Fired on the spot. Story 79. I have one for this. I'm a roofer, and I work for a well-established firm. The guy whose place I took on the team was fired for urinating off of the scaffold, straight on to the customer. Full golden shower with instant dismissal. Story 80. We have cameras in our trucks, and one of our drivers flagged for distracted driving multiple times one day. We watched the video footage. He was self-care while driving. We deliver food to disabled people. He was self-care and then delivering food. We had to notify the case manager, who had to notify the clients that their food may have been contaminated. Story 81. I was helping out with a network cabling job at a new hospital in a rural area far enough away from home. We stayed over for several days, but not so far that it wasn't drivable, so we had a couple of work vans. On the second night there on our midnight lunch break, as we were heading back to the work site, the team lead driving the other van, emblazoned with the company logo, thought it would be hilarious to spin out, fishtail, and squeal tires down the road in the small town USA. Johnny Law was on him like white on rice, and he was carted off to jail. Guy with most seniority had to call and wake up the operations manager to let them know what happened. Never saw the team lead again. Story 82. But of a long story, but maybe worth it. Had a friend work as part of the culinary program at a college. It was a really good job, and my friend was really proud of it. His job was in the back end. At first, it was to help get ingredients and equipment to the classrooms. He quickly got promoted to be responsible for dealing with the instructors and getting them what they needed for demonstrations. One day he noticed that the EpiPens and the first aid kits had expired. He went through the channels to try and get them replaced and found that it was the responsibility of the security department. She put in requests to them, but after a few weeks, the EpiPens hadn't been replaced. This upsets my dear friend greatly. So one day, in a fit of rage, he goes into the walk-in fridge, grabs out a cupcake, and smushes it onto the windshield of a pickup truck parked in front of the security office. The pickup belongs to the independent contractor and had nothing to do with the security department. He was fired immediately. Story 83. Mid-1990s, a worker who thought he was too important to be fired blatantly viewed adult content at work, giggling at people's discomfort when they came into his cube. Word got out to management, and a security officer started discreetly patrolling through our row a bit more and caught him in the act. Boom! Admin was cleaning out his cube the next day. Story 84. Had a guy watching adult content on a federal government computer. Not in an office setting, mind you. This was in an open workspace with a dozen or so people working with a very open view of what he was up to. Few of them took pics and sent them to the boss. He was gone within the hour. Story 85. Government employee working on a USMC base showed up tipsy to work at 8 a.m. Propositioned a young female Marine money for intimacy in front of the Marine Squadron commander. 13 witnesses, 10 of which were very high-ranking PP within the USMC, all gave sworn testimony regarding the events. Said commander grabbed the tipsy government worker and detained him in a room with a guard present. Formal investigation was launched, and after 6 months, the government worker was offered to keep his job at reduced pay, plus mandatory training and attending substance abuse classes. Government worker refused this offer, saying he didn't do what he was accused of and should be allowed to keep his job. Was terminated on the spot. The kicker is he was also in the National Guard as a high-ranking enlisted person. His National Guard unit was notified of what had occurred and the outcome, and he was basically fired from the National Guard and lost everything: pension, health care, etc. Last I heard, he's cleaning banks at night. Story 86. Had to sack a guy for removing his shirt on the shop floor as he was too hot. I managed a jeweler's and he was genuinely confused when I asked him if he thought that was acceptable behavior. Story 87. Let me tell you about Dave. Dave was a contractor we hired. His work was fine, but he was a bit odd. He announced to coworkers that since he turned 30, he was ready for marriage. Problem was, he didn't have a girlfriend. So he started asking others to fix him up and had one woman in another department he was fixated on. I was not his supervisor, but my colleague was. Our boss called us into a meeting because he was getting complaints about Dave. He would stare at women in meetings. This was a no-brainer, as he was a contractor, so we didn't need to go through the HR process. He told us to check the status of his work and work together to spread the workload around until we got a replacement. Meanwhile, our boss said he would contact the contracting firm and tell them that Dave needed a contractor's lunch, i.e., they would take him out to lunch and inform him he wasn't coming back. All this would take a couple of days. The very next day, we got a call from HR. A union grievance had been filed. We were curious what it was about. We expected that someone had moved some office furniture. Union had to move it. But it was not that. Apparently, Dave needed to go to the bathroom. There are bathrooms on each floor. He went to go, and the bathrooms were closed for cleaning. The female janitor asked him to use another one on another floor. Dave got angry and dropped his trousers and proceeded to use the urinal. We bounced him immediately. Story 88. I worked for a government agency where 90 of the employees were financial auditors. Woman working in procurement had the brilliant scheme of issuing fake invoices to be paid to her personal bank account. She was caught when the next monthly internal audit was conducted, which she knew about took place. Story 89. Fired an employee for selling her medications to random people in the parking lot. Fired one BC. He decided to combine two claims into one BC. The customer was flirty. Fired one pissing in a Mountain Dew bottle at his desk. BC, he didn't feel like getting up and walking 60 seconds to the bathroom. BTW, I worked for a Fortune 500 company. Corporate setting. Story 90. Guy passed out on a company trip while running his bathtub, tipsy. His clothes were in the tub, and he flooded the hotel floors underneath him and the lobby. Story 91. New hire, line cook, showed up late not once but twice in front of her manager's face. Not only that, but she was unorganized and unprepared in the line, slow and messy, unable to finish her tasks on time. It was me. It's totally fair, though. Story 92. A physician made a comment to a black employee who was entering a bathroom. That's the white bathroom. Fired immediately. Story 93. Was at a sales manager's meeting, so pretty laid-back standards in general, but a newer manager brought an underage girl, like 17, to a work event at a bar where we were having a legit scheduled meeting with some drinks. No one else brought a spouse significant other, which was allowed for certain events, so it was even weirder. They walked him out and fired him on the spot. Never saw him again. Story 94. Had a guy called in sick and got put on quarters, active duty military. He died that afternoon racing his motorcycle around on some backcountry roads about 40 miles away. Story 95. We had a manager that hit on one of his female subordinates on his work phone, and when she reported him, he got investigated and fired. Answer. We lost half a department recently because one of the managers was letting the chuds on his staff intimacy harass the only woman on their team. Come to find out that had been openly harassing the autistic guy who transferred out too. The manager, team lead, and two associates were all shown the door by the time HR had finished their investigation. Apparently, the manager's defense for himself was that there was nothing in the rulebook that said he had to do anything about it. He thought just not being actively involved in the harassment meant he wasn't responsible for it and therefore wouldn't suffer any personal consequences. Story 96. I had a temp who came into the office and hit his supervisor's computer and wouldn't fess up to it. We all knew it was him because he disliked the supervisor. We had to go over the security cameras, which not only showed him do it, but he brought his wife and kid along, and they helped themselves to some office supplies before they left. Story 97. A woman came in for her shift totally out of it. She was terminated. Security drove her home. The next day, she called me to apologize for being late to her shift that morning, said she was on her way. I had to then remind her that she'd been terminated the day before, so no worries about being late. Story 98. They were having an affair in the cash office of a supermarket. He was about 22. She was 47. They apparently forgot the cash office has cameras with sound. Surprisingly, they did not get terminated on the spot. He quit on the spot out of embarrassment, and she was permitted the option of going to another store. Story 99. It wasn't an immediate thing, but it did happen. I went to work for a state agency doing electronics maintenance and repairs. Guy that was already there said to me on Thursday of my first week, "Sure is nice to have another white man working." Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you'd like to see more content like this, you might be interested to know that I've created another channel with a similar theme, especially for those of you who enjoy what I do. I'll leave a link in the description, and I hope to see you there. Take care.